going to play with some oldies but goodies here in the studio. Colorburst, which is deeply pigmented powdered color that's activated by water. So here's a couple of packs that I have here in the shop. I have actually lots of packs like this in the shop with trios of colors, but I want to show you a few different ways that you can use them. First of all, you can mix up your own watercolor. There is no binder in this, so it's literally just powdered pigment. And if I puff a little bit of that color into a weld palette and drop a little bit of water in there, I'm making a really, really deep mixture of watercolor, and then I can just paint with the watercolor. Now, oh yeah, that's right, I'm painting on Yupo paper, which is giving me a really interesting, very, very smooth finish. Yupo receives water-based media, but it's very, very smooth. I almost forgot what I was painting on there for a second. Here is some, these are Zentangle tiles. So this is hot press printmaker's paper, 100% cotton. And again, just super rich, lush pigments. Now, what happens when, is a game I like to play, what happens when I mist my paper first, a little bit of water, and then I take the powders and I drop them directly onto the surface. Okay, not much. There's some little droplets there that are activating with the water. What happens when I mist that afterwards with a little bit of water? Well, a little bit more activation there. What happens when I take a wet brush and I run that through? Again, activating on the surface, but it's kind of cool that I'm getting these little speckles on the outside. Okay, I'm going to set that aside and let it dry. Let's see, what happens when I puff, puff, puff a little bit of the color? Just a little bit goes a long ways. I will stress that again and again. So that was some phthalo green and some ultramarine blue. And then what happens when I mist that with some water? I'm laying this over a stencil, if I didn't say that before. Just laying this over a stencil. And then I'm going to lift that stencil up. Oh, that's kind of cool. Have something right beside you that you can lay this down on. There we go. I've got an art journal here, and I can flip this over, lay it down, and no brayer at hand. So I'll use my hands. Actually, I'll use a cloth because I don't want to get this all over my hands. I've learned my lesson on this before. It does stain. It's dye base that will stain your hands. So, oh, that's pretty cool. So that's just taking the top of the stencil after I sprayed it. So here's the surface that it was sprayed on, and there's the top of it. What else can we do with this? Well, I already talked about mixing it up in the watercolor weld palette like that. What about dipping a pen in it? Can I write with it if I dip a pen in it? Yeah. What about using these brush markers? This is a felt tip brush marker. And yep, sure enough, I can dip it, pull up that color, and make marks with it. Now, is this pen ruined now? Is it forever going to be green? Nope, absolutely not. And get the green off of it by squeezing it and getting more water to flow through. You can see it's already lightening up. I don't know if you could see that or not. Okay, what else could we do with it? Well, again, you can take your brush directly to the surface. What if I wanted to do an entire wash with this? can I remove this afterwards? That is one of the things that it's known for, is it doesn't have binder in it. It's like watercolor. So what happens when I put this down on my paper first and then try and remove through a stencil? What would that look like? Let's do that. Lay this down. Yep, that looks pretty cool. Let's try that on more of an art journal page. Something that's more porous. That Yupo paper isn't really porous at all, so I want to try a background with just some puffs of color. Yeah, I keep going to the same colors, but you know, what can I say? I love these colors. So phthalo green, ultramarine blue, mist it with a little water. Again, it takes very little of this to activate. I'm going to go ahead and close the page, smash it down, and then reopen it and see what I get. That's always fun. So I'm going to get this dry. Actually, I'm going to spritz a little bit more water in here. Ooh, look what's happening. So it's water reactive as I'm splattering water on the surface. You see what's happening there? Little droplets are showing up. That's kind of cool. Another couple of things I'm going to try. I've got this dry. I want to see how, because it's water reactive, I want to see how it lifts after it's dry. Now, notice I'm doing this on a porous surface, so it's probably not lifting as much as it would on a non-porous surface like Yupo, but I can tell that it is lifting somewhat out of that pattern. Also, what happens when I put something over top of this like gesso? So here's a little bit of gesso, and here's a palette knife. What happens when I apply gesso over top through a stencil? What's going to happen to that gesso? Is it going to stay white, or is it going to reactivate the paint? I mean the pigments. Let's check that out. It looks to me like it's reactivating. So let's try that in another area. Pick up some of that gesso and lay it down. Yeah, I can already tell even before just letting it sit that it's reactivating some of that color, so it's tinting my gesso. That's an interesting application of these powders. So I've got a good background started, but it is lifting through subsequent wet layers. So I'm sure there are many, many more ways to use these powders, but here's just a few. They are colorburst powders, colorbursts. I have a couple of sets, actually one big set like this. These are by Ken Oliver, by the way. He's the one that developed these. And then I've got some trios of them in the shop. And yeah, a couple of different ways you can use them. Here's using it just like watercolor on Yupo, spritzing through a stencil, removing through a stencil. Once you put it through a stencil, you can flip it over and stamp with it. Ooh, you could stamp with it, couldn't you? Yeah, lots of different things. I bet you could remove something with a foam stamp with water. I don't have any foam stamps right here, but what happens when you take, I do have this stamp, so let's see, if I mist this with some water, remember it's water reactive, so what's going to happen when I stamp with water, yeah, it does. It's a little water reactive there, and you can see as it's developing there, the rings from the stamp are showing up. That's kind of cool. So mist and stamp and lift. Yeah, so lots of different ways. Here's another, that was that other card. Let's try it on here. So it did pull up some of the color. You can see it redeposited it. Oh, it's developing even more as it dries. You can really see it remove from the surface. I'm going to take a plain cloth and just blot it to lift some of that water out. Oh, that's stunning. Beautiful. Lots of different ways to use these powders. Man, I think these are a gold mine. Check it out.